Now next we are going to discuss about social economic movement. उसने मम्मी के नाम नहीं बताना. उसका नाम है राजीव. Social religious reform movement in general features of after giving rise to the desire for reforms down to the 19th century witnessed the birth of new vision, and it was modern vision enlightenment. This enlightenment vision was shaped the course of event of decades. So Renaissance is did not always follow the intent line, give rise to some undesirable byproducts also. So impact of British rule was like what happened. British rule on Indian society culture was widely different from India. Most of earlier invaders had come to India to settle down the India, and British conquest was different. It was like came at the time when India in the contrast to the enlightenment of Europe, and every aspect of science and scientific outlook presented the picture of stagnant civilization. So, social condition ripe for the reforms like religion, social ill was present in the society, superstition, social obscurantism, Hinduism had become steeped in the magic and superstition, and the price exercise and overwhelming men indeed unhealthy influence on the mind of people. Idolatry and polytheism helped the reinforced by the position and the monopoly of scriptural knowledge imparted a deceptive character of the religious system. Now, depression and position of women was social condition was equally depressing. Kill the female infants' births, and unusual child marriage was another society. The practice of polygamy and Bengal under the colonialism and took young girls' wives. Several women hardly had the married life worth name. Yet, when their husband died, they were expected to commit sati, which Raja. Caste problem, another deliberating factor of the caste, and a system of segregation of hierarchical order on the basis of ritual status. At the bottom of ladder came to the untouchable scheduled caste and called later the untouchable suffer from the numerous severe disability and restriction, and the system was people into the numerous group in modern time was become a major obstacle in the growth of united national feelings and spirit of democracy. So Muslim, Christian, Sikh who also practice untouchability and rigid caste system. Social mobility was checked. Social division grew. Individual initiative was thwarted. So humiliation of untouchability was present. Opposition to the Western culture. Establishment of colonial rule disseminates the colonial culture and ideology, and colonial culture and ideology and attempt to reinvigorate traditional institution and realize the potential of traditional culture. New awareness among the enlightened Indian. Impact of modern Western culture consciousness defect for the foreign power gave birth to the new awakening. There was a awareness that a vast country like India has been colonized by the handful of foreigners because of weakness within the Indian social structure and race of civilization. This produced diverse reaction. English educated Bengali youth, and like the response indeed was varied but need to reform social and religious life During the last decades, 19th century, the rising tide of nationalism, democracy also found expression of movement, and the nationalist sentiment, emergence of new economic forces, spread of education, impact of modern Western idea, culture, increase awareness among the masses. So, what are the middle class base? Like social base was regeneration in 19th century, and middle class was ideal derived from the growing awareness of contemporary development in the West, and the 19th century intelligentsia searched for its model in Europe. Middle class, which has its learned through the Western education, and about the great transformation in West from medieval to modern times, and Renaissance, Reformation, Enlightenment, democratic revolution of reforms, intelligentsia. 19th century India is not grow from trade and industry, but roots by lay in government service or profession of law, education, journalism. So the intellectual criteria was ideological unity were rationalism, religion, universalism, humanism. Rationalism was both judge social relevance. Raja Ram Mohan Rai firmly believed principle of causality linking was phenomenal universe demonstrably the sole criteria of truth. Akshay Kumar thus declaring the rationalism as a preceptor. And all natural social phenomena analyzed and understood by purely mechanistic process. So rational approach was they evaluated the contemporary socio-religious practices, socio-religious and consequences of Brahma Samaj was the infallibility of Veda was repudiated, and while the Aligarh movement emphasized reconciliation of Islamic teaching needs of modern age, Sayyid Ahmad Khan was extent of emphasizing that religious tenets was not immutable. Many of the intellectuals set aside the authority of religion, evaluated truth and criteria of logic, reason, science, and Swami Vivekananda was investigating the applied science should be the basis on which religion must be justified. And some reform tended to appeal to faith and ancient authority to support the appeal. A rational secular outlook. Akshay Kumar that for instance brought medical opinion to support against child marriage, and the revival was break with the tradition and vices, and though the reformer tried to reform the religious, there was a universal aspect of religious perspective. Raja Ram Mohan Rai considered different religious national embodiment of universal theism, basic of universal principles such as monotheism of Veda, unilateralism, Christianity. Ahmad Khan said all prophets had same deen and every country and nation different prophets. So social reform, universalistic perspective was identity of social political outlook. New humanitarianism of morality reforms movement which include the notion that humanity progress and that moral value ultimately those value which favor the human progress. Humanistic aspect was religious reform movement was to seen in the emphasis of individual right to interpret religious scripture light of human reason and human welfare. Religious reformation important but not the exclusion of concern, and attention was focused on worldly existence and not the issue of salvation. So worldliness because of strong religious elements of social practice and ideology time it was the possible undertaken any social action. So movement took into the ambit of entire cultural existence, evolution on alternative cultural ideological system, regeneration of traditional institution, and concern of the movement was concerned were manifest attempt to reconstruct the traditional knowledge, use of development, vernacular language, creating the alternative system of education, defense of religion, efforts to regenerate the Indian art and literature, emphasize on the Indian dress and food, revitalize the Indian system. So reform movement could broadly classified into two categories. Reformist movement like Brahma Samaj, Pratna Samaj, Aligarh movement, Revivalist movement, Arya Samaj, Deoband movement, and direction of social reform, the humanistic ideal of social equality and equal worth of all individuals, which inspired the educated middle class field of social reform. So social reform movement was linked to the religious reform and all the social ills like untouchability, gender-based inequality was now not there, and the social reform movement gradually was itself from the religious adopted a secular approach, and reform movement had a rather narrow social base being limited to the upper and middle class upper caste who tried to balance their modernized view of existing social condition, and social reform movement penetrated the lower strata of society to revolutionize the reconstruct the social sphere. So organizations such as Social Conference, Servant of Indian Society, Christian Missionary instrument in the social reforms enlightened the individual like Jyotirba Phule, Gopal Hari Deshmukh, A.T. Telang, Malabari Karve, Narayan Guru, Ramaswamy Naikar, and Ambedkar. Especially with the onset of 20th century, the national movement provided leadership and organization for social reforms, and to reach the masses, reform used the Indian language to propagate the a variety of media, novel, drama, poetry. Fight for the betterment of position of women. Reformers had worked against the great odds of women generally accorded the low status were considered to be inferior adjust men with no identity of own. They enjoyed no scope for giving expression. So parda, early marriage, widow remarriage, sati, both Hindu Muslim women economically socially dependent. Education was generally denied and the Hindu women did not enjoy the right to inherently property permit to undesirable marriage. Muslim women could inherently property but only half of much could. While matters of divorce, no equality between the men and women, polygamy was prevalent. Glorification as wife and mother was the only way in which society recognized the contribution of women. The improvement of the status of women in society was considered to be vital, and social reformer worked towards the radical change in the domestic sphere. And initially, the socialization of individual took place, where the crucial role played by women. So, the social reform movement was freedom struggle movement led the enlightenment of women, and later Free India Constitution have done much of emancipation of women. So, doctrine of individualism, equality was appealed to true religion, inferior status of raise the voice against the degrading custom, child marriage, parda, polygamy, restriction of widow marriage, worked relentlessly to establish education system for general propagate uselessness of medieval feudal attitude. So steps taken to ameliorate the women position was abolition of sati by the regulation of 1859 Bengal. It is a Bengal presidency alone was extended the modified form of Madras and Bombay. Now preventing the female infanticide, the practice of murdering the female infants was the birth was a common practice among the upper class Bengali and Rajput who considered female to be economic burden, and the Bengal regulation was declared infanticide illegal and equivalent to murder. So it's compulsory for the parent to register the birth of all babies and provided for verification of female children for same births. Widow remarriage was the Brahma Samaj had the issue of widow remarriage high in agenda and did much to popularize it. But it was mainly due to efforts of Pandit Ishwar Chand Vidyasagar, the principal of Sanskrit College, Calcutta, that Hindu widow remarriage was passed. It legalized the marriage of widow and declared issue from the marriage legitimate. Vidyasagar cited Vedic texts to prove that the Hindu remarriage sanctioned widow marriage. Jagannath Sarkar said Bau Daiji were among the active promoter of girls' school in the Maharashtra. Vishnu Shastri Pandit founded the widow remarriage, and similar efforts were made by the Professor D.K. Karve in the Western India and by the Veer Salingam Puntulu. So Karve himself married a widow and he dedicated his life for upliftment of Hindu of widow. Widow Remarriage Association was widow home to Pune and vocational training. Now controlling the child marriage. So Native Marriage Act was passed 1872, signify the action prohibiting the child marriage. Hindu, Muslim, other recognized faiths. So B.M. Maladari rewarded the enactment of act and further pushed the marriage age 18 to 14 and boys and girls. So it was Child Marriage Resentment Act 1978. Education for the women was the Juvenile Justice Calcutta Female Society was there. So Bethune School founded the Bethune Jade Bethune. So in Calcutta, women education arose, and Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, associated with no less than 35 girls' school in Bengal, considered one of the pioneer women education. Charles Wood dispatch education laid great stress on the need for the female education, and Indian Women University set up the Professor Karve, outstanding institution imparting the education to the women. And participation in the Swadeshi and the anti-partition and the home rule movement during the opening decades were 20th century major liberating experience, and they faced the lathi and bullets. Now Sarojini Naidu went to become a president of Indian National Congress and later governor of the United Province also. So picketing and political position and jail also was there. Now women organization was Sarla Devi Chaudharain convened the first meeting of Bharat Stri Mohammed in the Allahabad, and first major Indian women organization set up women objective including the promotion of education, women abolition of parda, improvement socio-economic political status of women. Sarada Devi believed that men working, women upliftment lived under a shadow of Manu. Ramabai was the founded the Ladies Social Conference under the parent organization. Pandita Ramabai Saraswati founded Arya Mahila Samaj, created for improvement educational syllabus of women, and before the English Education Commission referred to the Queen Victoria, and medical education for women with the started Lady Dufferin and later Ramabai. The National Council for Women, a national branch for International Council for Women. Advancement, she opined that Parda system, caste difference, lack of education, women from important position on the executive committee of the council. So India First Lady was the Tarabai, ancient wife of a wealthy banker and Muslim family and Marathi daughter of the Keshav Chandra Sen. However, according to the critics, the philanthropic style was being followed. All India Women Conference founded the Margaret Cousin was perhaps the first women organization. Important founding members including the Maharani Chimna Devi and Rani Sahiba Sangi Sarojini Naidu, Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay and the Lady Dharoba Tata. Objective was work for society based on principle of social justice, integrity, equal rights, opportunity and to secure the every human being. Essential life was there. All India Women's Association, Sarla Act, Hindu Women Rights Property Factory Act, Hindu Marriage Act, Hindu Minority Guardianship Act, Hindu Adoption Maintenance Act, Suppression Immoral Traffic Act, Maternity Act, Dowry Prohibition, Equal Remuneration, struggle against the caste-based exploitation was there. So concept of Hindu Chatur Varna system dictated the caste of person determined by the status and relative purity, but pursue what's good. Like in general, caste decided person's social loyalty. The dress, food, place, residence, all regulated by caste factor. Worst hit discriminatory institution caste were untouchables. So now factor of help to mitigate the caste-based discrimination. British rule perhaps without intention created certain conditions that undermine the caste consciousness. So British rule in India was the certain forces sometimes so direct administration measure and sometimes indirectly by creating suitable condition. So measure and negative effects on the one way and positive effects too. So the creation of private property in land and free sale of land upsets caste equation. A close interlink between the caste vocational could not be survive village autocracy. Besides, modern commerce and industry gave rise to several economic avenues, and the British administration introduced concept of equality before law, uniformity, and judicial function of caste panchayat. The social reform movement also strove to undermine caste-based exploitation. So Arya Samaj, Pratna Samaj, Brahma Samaj, Ramakrishna Mission, Theosophical Society, Social Conference worked to spread the education among untouchables. Caste distincting law, karma, which formed the basis of religious philosophical defense of undemocratic authorization of caste. Arya Samaj, while crusading against the disintegration of Hindu society, aimed restructuring its original fourfold revision. The national movement took inspired from the principle of liberty and equality and forced and divided society. The national leader organization, the caste privileges, fought for equal civil rights and free development of individual. The caste division were diluted, although the limited manner, because of the mass participation, demonstration, meeting, and satyagraha. Now free education and for to the depressed class and introduced the ruler states. Travancore, Indore, Deva took initiative opening all the state temple, and Gandhi always mind of objective eradicating the untouchability. So argued that Shastra did not sanction the untouchability. With the increasing opportunity, education, general awakening, the striving among the lower caste themselves. So rights against the upper class, Maharashtra, Jyotirba Phule, Brahminical domination in Hindu society accorded the highest priority to education to the lower caste. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, who experienced the worst form of caste discrimination, and fought against the upper caste tyranny, and he organized the All India Scheduled Caste Federation, All India Depressed Class Association. Ambedkar condemned the hierarchical insular caste system and real progress of nation. The struggle depressed class led to the provision of special representation of classes. Another Maharaja of Kolhapur encouraged the non-Brahmin movement. During the South India non-Brahmin movement, self-respect movement, E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, numerous movement demanding their entry of lower caste into the temple, Sri Narayana Guru, Kerala, lifelong struggle against the upper caste domination, and one religion, one caste, one God, mankind, which was the disciple Shahadara Ayappam changed into the no religion, no caste, and no god. So Brahma Ambedkar led to the Maha Satyagraha and the challenges regressive custom of caste of Hindu stress, necessarily removing the idea of high and low and inculcating the self elevation of self help, self respect, self knowledge, profession of untouchables. And Ambedkar took what there was a huge protest of caste Hindu, and Dr. Ambedkar established the Bahishkrit Hitkani Sabha to highlight the difficulties of the grievance of the Dalits, educate, agitate, organize. The Constitution for Free India made equality, non-discrimination on basis of caste. The Constitution of Free India abolished the untouchability, declared endorsement for any desirable aligning the untouchability. So now in the summary, factor which gave the rise to the reform movement is the presence of colonial movement, obscurantism, superstition, polytheism, idolatry, degraded position of women, exploitative caste hierarchy. So rational, religious, universal, humanistic secularism was the ideology for the system. Early marriage, lack of education, unequal rights to marriage, divorce, inheritance, polygamy, female infanticide. So major contribution of reform was Bengal Regulation, Bengali Sati, Bengal Regulation Act, declaring infanticide illegal, age of consent act, Sarda Act, special marriage act, Hindu marriage act, Suppression of Immoral Traffic Act, Dowry Prohibition Act, force now struggle against the caste was the force unleashed colonial administration, social reform movement, national movement, Gandhi campaign against untouchability, striving among lower caste due to better education and employment, free India constitution. So this was the movements was